Now, you'll be able to do business, you'll be able to do everything you can do now, only do it as a free person instead, and a person who has the sovereign powers of a sovereign citizen. But it may take a little time getting adjusted to it and getting used to it. So take your time. Take the time that it takes to study and to learn for yourself and to choose for yourself. And then be prepared to defend those rights once you've reclaimed them. Because the government isn't all that willing to see the sovereignty be restored to the people at this point. They're all too happy right now to be the masters. But somebody's got to step forward and draw the line in the sand and tell the government to go back to the limited authority and jurisdiction that the Constitution laid out for you. And quite frankly, the more the merrier. If there's only one person on that line, it's going to be a lot harder to hold the line back than if there's 10 million people on that line. And right now there are anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million people reclaiming their sovereignty in this country, and they are afraid to death of that. And because we live in the communications revolution, you cannot keep it a secret any longer. Because we are all inter-networked, and we're surfing the internet, and we're videoing, and we're autoing, and we're publishing books, and we're telling each other. You cannot suppress the truth. You cannot do it. They cannot succeed. Though they will try. And they will pass counterterrorism bills, and they'll pass bills till they're blue in the face. But those don't apply to me. The executive orders don't apply to me. Acts of Congress don't apply to me. Unless they're prefixed with an H. If it's prefixed with an H, then they're wearing the hat of the national government. If it's prefixed with an HR, it's for the corporation, which is only for the U.S. citizens. That's the distinction between when your senators and your congressmen are wearing the hat of the national government or wearing the hat of the federal corporation. When they went bankrupt in 1933, they went bankrupt for all the U.S. citizens, not the sovereign citizens. But unfortunately, the sovereign citizens turned in their gold just like everybody else and figured, well, this is the patriotic thing to do. They believed that at that time because they didn't know any better. So if you want the government to go away, make them obsolete. And restore the institutions that we do have available, the jural societies, the constitutional republics, those things we have. We have the American system of law right here at our disposal. It's there. They haven't revoked it, they haven't repealed it, they haven't even deleted the sections that they ought to be deleting. But there's too many law books out there, and it'd be pretty hard to rip out all the pages that were pertinent to us. Plus, it's all available on CD-ROM as well. So, don't be afraid to use these tools that we have available here, because this is what we've got going for us. In the last 3 years, I have watched rooms of people where nobody knew what the heck I was talking about. They had never heard any of it before, to rooms full of people that have heard bits and pieces of it, and lots of people who have heard a lot about it, and a lot of people who are taking a lot of action about it. And that's only in the course of a couple years that has happened. I think perhaps for the first time in history that all the pieces of the puzzle are there. We can see the whole thing transparently now. And by the end of this evening, I hope you'll all see it as transparently as I do, and how all these different things relate. The sovereignty, the citizenship, and now we're going to talk about politics, economics, and law, and you're going to see how all those systems relate. And then you're going to see transparently that they only have one agenda. There's only one agenda. It's very simple. They just want to control the world. It's very simple. And they're using every means at their disposal. Political means, economic means, legal means, military means, police means, media, propaganda, deception, distraction, demoralization, terrorism, whatever. And so we have to be better prepared, better educated, develop better strategies than they do. And that's what will make the difference. strategic planning from a citizen's point of view and use all the tools that we have available to communicate it broadly, because the cat's out of the bag and there's no way they're going to stuff it back in the bag again. There aren't enough concentration camps in this country to suppress it. There are not enough military forces on this entire planet to suppress this country. Look. Just look at how much firepower was directed at Iraq. All of the Western power structures directed their mighty firepower on this one small little country. That was it. That was the big show. That's all they've got to show. This country is far too decentralized, far too rural, far too independent. They could never take it by military means. The only way they can take it is by psychological warfare and psychological means, where they convince you that you're slaves and you volunteer into it and you consent to it. And that has been their strategy from day one, because they knew they could never invade this country militarily and succeed. There's too many people that have guns still. And even in their own Gallup poll, which I was surprised at, and Gallup had polled the people here during the aftermath in the wake of the Oklahoma City bombings, that there were 70 million Americans that were willing to take up arms against their government, if necessary, to defend their rights. That's pretty amazing. Now, I'm not an advocate of violence, and I'm not an advocate of war as the first resort. I'm an advocate of using all the other tools we have available, including the legal system and the communication system and the community systems that we have available. That's our first line of defense and offense in all of this. That we might even win this thing without firing a single shot if we develop the strategies that can work in the midst of that. That would be a great revolution. As we all know, in the wake of the Oklahoma City bombing, there's been a lot of talking about and raising of some of the issues, and slanting and distorting of the issues as well. But there is an opportunity here for a forum that didn't exist before. And I commiserate with the tragedy for the victims of the bombing and all the possible scenarios of who done it and how it actually happened, and whether it was an extremist faction of the militia, which I doubt very seriously, whether the federal government bombed it, whether the Japanese bombed it. There are all kinds of different scenarios here that have been postulated with various affidavits and evidence to support various points of view. And I'm not at the point where I'm going to make a conclusion about any of that. I'm going to reserve judgment for a while until there's a few more chips in a row. But it's very interesting to watch the media spin and to watch also our reaction too. And I suggest that we be considerate in what we take on as fact and what we take on as speculation with regards to it all. Because it doesn't help our cause to speculate falsely and to spread false rumors about things that we really don't have substantial evidence for. Let's wait to see all the evidence, and then we'll bring forth the appropriate indictments. But until that time, it's better to reserve judgment. So, who really holds the power in Washington, D.C.? How do the political systems actually work? It's really very simple. The federal United States is a corporation and a national government both. When the federal government went bankrupt for the first time in 1930, which may be news to some people, but to others it's not news. But the government has been bankrupt 7 times in this century. And every time the federal government goes bankrupt, it has to reorganize. It has to raise the debt ceiling and go begging to the Federal Reserve to borrow some more money to keep the doors of the power structure open a little longer. Otherwise, Congress would be on an indefinite vacation, which might be a good idea. I would pay for a vacation, a permanent vacation for all of Congress for 5 years or so, and then maybe we could reinvent this thing, actually reinvent it, not Bill Clinton's reinventing government plan, but really reinvent it from the citizens' point of view this time, from the sovereign, we the people point of view once again. Who really directs the federal United States are the creditors. This is no great mystery to those who understand the law. Now, if you are a bankrupt company, corporation, or individual, who directs your affairs? Your creditors do. A bankrupt entity no longer has the legal power or authority to direct its own affairs. Every time the federal government went bankrupt, it had to transfer its authority over to its creditors in order to reorganize the assets to resolve the bankruptcy to the satisfaction of the creditors. Otherwise, they would go on permanent vacation. And so it's very easy to see why the elected representatives and the president and all the agencies of government are so beholden to the creditors of the federal United States.